Welcome back, everyone. This is the Oracle Decodes alternate timelines, 9/11, the Lovers, and the Tower. Back to the future again. We're jumping back into this decoding by picking up some threads again from our last couple of decodings, where we left off decoding the major arcana of the tarot deck with the number 5, or the Roman numeral 5 card, the Hierophant, which we tied in, as we saw in our last piece, to the Back to the Future time travel story. Prior to that, we also looked at our decoding of the number 15 of the tarot, the Devil card. So we're going to begin here with taking a look at the next two cards in order from where we left off. So we're going to the number 6, the Lovers card, and the number 16, the Tower card, and see how these tie into the Back to the Future story. But not just to the time travel element that we already decoded in the last piece, but to this concept of alternate timelines or alternate realities that result from jumping timelines altogether, like we also see as a theme in the Back to the Future story as well. We're also going to see some other surprising tie-ins that weave together not just the travels of the planet Venus that we've looked at before, but also what Adam and Eve and 9/11 have to do with any of this. So you might want to check out some of our previous decodings where we've looked at some of these stories. Let's cue up a screenshot from Stellarium again to a familiar sky story scene we've seen many times before. We're looking up again at the summer solstice noontime sky at a special place I call the real oracle or the real all-seeing eye in the sky, which, as we've discovered, is the secret decoder ring to unlock the real meaning behind the most famous stories on Earth. We're choosing a location on Earth in the Northern Hemisphere as we look to start again on the summer solstice at high noon because, as we're learning here, the tarot cards encode this one way to keep a sky clock calendar, and it tells us that this is the place to begin. So as you can see, we're laying out here where we've decoded the tarot deck up to card number 5. Everything that you can see here is from the middle, or the heart of the real oracle, or the real all-seeing eye, the crossing point of the north-south meridian line in the arc of the ecliptic, over to the west side of the arc of the ecliptic, to the western horizon of the Earth, where you can find the number 5 card, the Hierophant, encoding for the constellation of Pisces. Now you can see that it's just above the western horizon of the Earth. So that brings us to the number 6 card, the Lovers card. It means that we're going to have to now look just to the east of that special crossing point of the north-south meridian line in the arc of the ecliptic as we go forward. And there we find Gemini, the twins. And as we've also previously decoded, that's Adam and Eve from the book of Genesis in the Bible story. Here now we can decode that Gemini is also encoded on the number 6 card of the tarot deck, the Lovers. But it's not just Gemini. There's another element to the Lovers card, and that's the travels of the planet Venus too. So let's take a closer look at the symbolism shown on the number 6 card of the Lovers and fully decode it. We've got the golden sunny yellow background, and the whole entire top of the Lovers card is filled with an image of the sun. So comparing that to the sky story picture on the summer solstice at high noon, you can see the sun is found in Orion's outstretched hand, but could also be said to be shining on Gemini, the twins here as well. The man and the woman, the lovers, are there in front of a mountain, encoding Gemini's location on its journey, nearing the top of the mountain or the cross of the north-south meridian line in the arc of the ecliptic. And we can also decode that the Lovers on the number 6 card of the tarot deck is Adam and Eve specifically, as they're standing there in front of 2 trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, from the book of Genesis in the Bible. And as you can see, we know that by the symbol of the serpent that's wrapped around one of the trees, the same serpent who tempts Eve to eat from the fruit of the knowledge of, from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, we've previously decoded, when we were looking at the Adam and Eve story in Genesis, that the serpent in the story encodes for the constellation of Hydra, as you can see here. So that's obviously not the same thing then as what we've already decoded with the devil, Satan, and Lucifer, that all encode for the travel of the planet Venus. But many people, remember, are taught as Christians that it's this serpent from Genesis that's the same devil or Satan at the end of the story of the Bible in the book of Revelation. It even says it in the book of Revelation, right? That it goes right back to the beginning in Genesis, referencing that old serpent, right? That is meeting his end, tied to the devil or Satan. So what does this mean? Well, the connection between the two is found once again when looking at the travels of the planet Venus for the answer. It's the planet Venus that's encoded on the Lover's card behind Adam and Eve there. The angel of God is the morning star, specifically Lucifer, with arms and wings spread. So how do we know that this angel specifically is Lucifer, or encoding for the planet Venus? Well, as we've seen previously on the number 2 card, the High Priestess tells us where we start in the 8-year cycle of Venus, where Venus is found right in the middle of the constellation of Taurus, right in the bullseye area, in the middle of the High Priestess's crown. So that's year 1. And then the number 3 card, the Empress, tells us about the last station in Venus's 8-year cycle, where the planet Venus, or the Empress, lines up right in the heart of the real all-seeing eye, or the real oracle, at the end of her 8-year cycle before she repeats it again. But here, after the first station where we find Venus in the bullseye of Taurus, it's now here at the 2nd year of Venus's 8-year cycle, where she moves over to the east side of the cross of the north-south meridian line and the arc of the ecliptic. And as we move to the summer solstice at high noon, in what we commonly call 2021, so you can see this, Venus in year 2 of her cycle is found in the constellation of Gemini, the twins, or Adam and Eve, on the Lovers tarot card. So it is Lucifer there behind them. So looking again with this knowledge of the travels of the planet Venus to guide us, here we see Venus found at year 2 of her 8-year cycle being the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that's in Eve's hand. And it's just above the head of Hydra, or the serpent that tempted Eve. And now you're starting to see how this does tie together that old serpent from Genesis that was referenced in the book of Revelation. And that's something that I'm sure we're going to revisit again in the future in future decodings. So you can also see with all the symbols on the Lover's card and what they represent, that this is also, when you take in the big picture of the number 6 card, the Lovers, it's another reason why the planet Venus specifically is associated with romantic love. Now, when you compare the Lovers, the number 6 card, to the Devil, the number 15 card, you can see that when you're comparing them, they could also be thought of as mirror images or opposites of one another, right? They have much of the same symbolism, the most obvious being that it's the same lovers, or Adam and Eve, on the number 6 card that we see chained up to the devil on the number 15 card. And then also note that when you add the numbers 1 and 5 together from the number 15 card, you sum that up to the answer of 6, the mirror image on the Lover's card, number 6. So the obvious opposites is also shown, with the Lover's card being that sunny yellow sky, and comparing that to the black background of the Devil card tells us, well, he's found down there in the dark underworld realm of hell, right? Where Lucifer is thrown down into, where Satan reigns, not as a king, but as Prince of Darkness, just one of his known titles that he's been given. So that takes us to a look at the opposite time of day then, again, to look down there in the underworld with the devil and the lovers, or Adam and Eve, chained up to him, at midnight on the summer solstice, in the dark alternate reality of hell. To find the opposite of the Lover's card on here, year 2 of Venus's 8-year cycle. Remember, that's where we find Venus in Gemini, the twins, or Adam and Eve's hand. But remember, from our perspective in the northern hemisphere on the summer solstice at midnight, when we're looking down into the abyss, in the deep darkness of hell, that it's an inverted realm, or upside down from our perspective. So that's where we're looking again in this screenshot. But we're also moving with it 10 days forward in the sky story to what we commonly call the beginning of July of 2020. And we're going to see how this is going to help us properly decode from the tarot deck, from the Devil card, which is number 15, to the next in order, the number 16 card of the tarot, the Tower. Notice it's the same black background we saw on the Devil card, on the number 15 card, that we see here in the next in order, number 16 Tower card. It encodes for the same dark underworld inverted realm where you'll find the Devil. And notice that the Tower itself on the card sits on top of what looks very similar to a very famous monument on the ground here in what we commonly call America. It's no coincidence that it looks just like Devil's Tower, right? The Tower itself is encoding for the body of the constellation of our old friend Orion, found at this time to be hanging upside down at that special cross of the north-south meridian line and the arc of the ecliptic. And from our perspective, being that he's in this inverted position or upside down, this is also partly encoding the two people falling out of the tower. As you can see, they're falling out head first or upside down. The crown that's being knocked off the tower is the crown of Auriga that always crowns Orion. And the tower here, the constellation of Auriga is crowning, but in this screenshot is not visible on the image because Auriga is beyond the boundary of the arc of the ecliptic, or the crown is falling off the tower like on the card. And the lightning bolt striking the top of the tower on the tarot card could be Orion's outstretched arm over his upside-down head, but if you look at the constellation of Eridanus, or the river, that's tied always to the constellation of Orion, doesn't it look like that zigzagged lightning bolt striking the top of the tower on the card? The fire on the top of the tower is representing the sun. And notice that it's the sun's location at this time where it's found right to be in the constellation of Gemini, or the twins, representing the two people jumping from the flaming tower, falling upside down. In the upside down realm, in the underworld, they're falling out of the Devil's Tower in hell. Now we're looking at the Tower card of the Tarot card, and you might associate that imagery automatically with what many of us watched unfold on television, at least at the time, the events we now just commonly call 9/11. An event that we've taken a look at in previous decodings, starting with the Oracle Decodes Adam and Eve Memorial Day and 9/11. And in that decoding, we've already seen that it's not this alignment we're looking at here with the Tower card, but it is the constellation of Gemini, or the twins. Those are the two big stars in the 9/11 show. Gemini encodes for the Twin Towers. And those are the Twin Towers that came down that day at Ground Zero in New York City on what we call 9/11. Now remember, the Liar Liar Pants on Fire Secret Drama Society are writing from this Sky Story template. So they're writing out Sky Story scripts. So they're using this alchemical principle, you can think of it as above, so below. So the Twin Towers are encoding for the constellation of Gemini, the twins, that's been reimagined to be the Twin Towers in the Sky Story. So as you can see, once again, as we looked at before, on what we commonly call 9/11 at midnight, the screenshot shows us the Sky Story picture of what is happening. And you can see that it's the last day that the constellation of Gemini, or the twins, is still found to be completely descended, or below the horizon of the Earth. But the constellation of Auriga at the same time is found to be fully risen above the eastern horizon of the Earth. Think like the east coast of what we commonly call America on the ground, in New York, in the east where things begin. And we're looking at the time corresponding to the quote-unquote official start, right? The beginning of the day at midnight. From another angle, you can see how this is where they got Ground Zero from the Sky Story because of the way Auriga is shaped. This is something that's also encoded, you're going to see here, in another very famous movie that I'm certain we're going to get more into in future decodings, The Matrix. Now, many have watched The Matrix and have noticed many things that are interesting about it and have made commentary on several things, but one of them is this date that can be seen on Thomas Anderson's soon-to-be expiring passport. So when Thomas Anderson is taken by Smith and other agents to be interrogated in that famous scene, the expiration date of Thomas Anderson's passport in the file reads, as you can see, 9/11. The reason why you're going to see as we move forward in the sky story the next day to what we commonly call September 12th of 2020 at midnight, it's only then that the first star of the constellation of Gemini, or the twins, is risen over the eastern horizon of the Earth again, along with Orion's bow that has also just broken the eastern horizon as well. These two constellations represent Thomas Anderson's dual identity, at least in part, in what a Thomas Anderson will now soon be called just Neo, with a new name. So passing over is Neo from the Matrix dream world back into the real world as a new person with a new name, Neo, which is why Thomas Anderson's passport, giving him permission to pass through this eastern horizon port in the sky story from the dream world Matrix into the celestial sea area. Well, that's because a new son of man with a new name, Neo, is being born, and his old passport will be expiring. So is this the same sky story that's also being referenced in Back to the Future as we looked at in our last decoding? Because many who've watched Back to the Future also noted another reference to the date of what we commonly call 9/11. Many have also commented on this as being a bit of predictive programming in the movie, showing a foreshadowing of what will to be from that point be a future event that hasn't happened yet on Earth in the events of 9/11. So at the beginning of the film, Back to the Future, Marty McFly is told by Doc Brown to meet him at the Twin Pines Mall, where he's going to show Marty the time-traveling DeLorean he invented, and he tells Marty not to be late. But Marty is late, and in getting there, the storytellers of the Back to the Future story made sure to show us that on the Twin Pines Mall sign, it's a time that when you flip it upside down, reads 9/11. But at the end of the Back to the Future story, when Marty McFly returns back to the future again in 1985, and Marty runs back to the mall to meet Doc Brown again, the name of the mall has changed from Twin Pines to Lone Pine Mall, and the time, when you turn it upside down this time, could be read as HEL, or hell. But these references, as you're about to see, although are related, again, to Gemini or the twins, that isn't exactly what the changed name and the changed time on the mall sign really means in reference and what it has to do with 9/11. So let's find out for the first time what it does really mean. So both at the beginning and the end of the Back to the Future film, this has everything to do with what we've looked at in this piece so far, and others as well. And let's take a look at what this is referencing, what it really has to do with 9/11. And it turns out it has to do, once again, with the devilishly tricky traveling path of Venus, which, as you can see in this screenshot, in the 12th of what we commonly call September of 2020, the planet of Venus, or Lucifer, is still found down there in hell. And the constellation that Venus is found in during this time of year, at least this year, is Cancer, the crab. But to see why this is tying into the sky story and to the Back to the Future story in reference to 9/11, let's flip our perspective to the noontime sky on what we commonly call 9/11 of 2020 to make what I'm going to show you next easier to see. So again, notice we're at year 1 of Venus's tricky travels of her 8-year cycle. on what we commonly call September 11th of 2020 at high noon, where we find Venus right in the middle of the constellation of Cancer the Crab. Reimagined by the Back to the Future storytellers here because of the way that Cancer is shaped to be those twin pine trees that the mall in Back to the Future took its name from, because Venus is found right in between those twin pines on what we commonly call 9/11, in year 1 of Venus's cycle. Going ahead now year over year quickly to look again at Venus's 8-year cycle from this 9/11 perspective, we see that in the following year, year 2, and what we commonly call 2021, Venus is found now to be in the constellation of Virgo. Year 3, and what we commonly call 2022, Venus is now in alignment with both the Sun and the constellation of Leo, near the cross of the North-South Meridian and the arc of the ecliptic. Year 4, on what we commonly call 9/11 of 2023. So we're halfway through Venus's 8-year cycle. Venus is found back in the constellation of Cancer again, but not between the twin pines as we found Venus in year 1, but here in year 4, Venus is found with only one pine, or a lone pine, as you can see in this screenshot. So let's quickly look at the second half of Venus's 8-year cycle during what we commonly call the 9/11 time of year. And we see here in year 5 that Venus is back in the constellation of Virgo again in Venus's 8-year cycle. In year 6, Venus is found in between Leo and Cancer at high noon on what we commonly call 2025. Year 7, Venus is found back in Virgo, but this time at Virgo's feet in what we commonly call 2026. In year 8, Venus is moved up in the constellation of Virgo and now found Venus is in Virgo's hand. And in 2028, as we commonly call it, the 8-year cycle of Venus then repeats as Venus is found back in between those twin pines at the mall in Back to the Future. But it wasn't Twin Pines Mall that Marty McFly went back to 1985, right? He came back to the future in 1985, not at the first year of Venus's cycle, as you can see, but halfway through it, and returned then to an alternate reality of 1985, to the Lone Pine Mall. Because of his time traveling that he did, it interfered with the 1955 timeline that he was not even born in yet, when he interacted and then changed the interactions that resulted between what will be his future parents. Marty's interaction with them back in 1955 changed the dynamics internally of his own father, George McFly, and by standing up to the lifelong bully he had, Biff, in front of what will be his future wife and Marty's mom, Lorraine, it's because of this event, the love affair that the two of them developed and lived out together was passionate and strong, very different than the 1985 future this same couple was shown in and experiencing in their sad marriage at the beginning of the Back to the Future movie. So that brings us back to Gemini then, again to the number 6 card of the Tarot deck, the Lovers, where during the summer solstice at midnight, during year 2 of planet Venus's cycle, you can find Venus in the underworld in Gemini or in the Lover's hand. To escape a hellish future lived out for the McFly family, well, that was all changed when George McFly balled up his fist to punch Biff in the face for putting his hands on what will be his future wife. This corresponds to Venus being found in the Lover's hands. So at the end of Back to the Future, it's also why the now published author, George McFly, puts his new book called A Match Made in Space in his son Marty's hands. The cover art of which looks a whole lot like the number 6 card, the Lovers, of the Tarot deck, right? The alternate reality or alternate timeline of 1985 Marty entered into, because as we've seen, this corresponds to his coming back to a different year in the 8-year cycle of the planet Venus. This ripple effect of changes for Marty McFly continues on as we see in Back to the Future Part 2. when we arrive in the future with Doc Brown and Marty to the year we commonly call 2015, where because of Marty's previous interactions with both his parents and Biff back in 1955, and by the way, doesn't Biff Tannen look a whole lot like who we know to be the current president of the United States, Donald Trump? Well, Biff has become Marty's stepdad in part 2, having married his mother after killing Marty's dad. In this alternate reality, on the alternate timeline, Marty is faced with this hellish reality he's found himself in when he's shown in Hill Valley, where they're all from. His awful stepdad, Biff Tannen's face, is plastered in a grandiose way on the front of the Pleasure Paradise Tower he lives in the penthouse of. So this, as you can see, is definitely how the number 16 of the tarot deck, the Tower, does tie back in here. Not only into the Back to the Future story in part 2, but also what has become, as of late, an undeniable inverted world that seems to have us all existing in some bizarre alternate reality with predictive programming everywhere if you know through which lens to look. It's no coincidence I'm recording this on what is known as Election Day of 2020, where we have yet to see what script will be written for Trump by the Liar Liar Pants on Fire secret drama society that he is a part of. I think that's a good place to end this piece, and we'll pick it back up in our next decoding. Until we meet again in the present, be well.